I lifted the little box from the table and felt every eye land on me. My sister had just squealed over a brand new SUV parked in the driveway with a red bow, admiring a gleaming Rolex that caught the light every time he moved. When I peeled back the thin paper around my gift, I already knew something was off. The box was too light, too hollow, too careless. I opened it anyway. A single pair of socks, thin cotton, beige, the kind sold in bulk bins near the checkout at the discount store on Hendersonville Road. My sister leaned back in her chair with that familiar smirk I had not seen in 12 years. "Be grateful you are even here." She did not have to say it loudly. The room carried her meaning for her. I turned the socks over. The price tag was still attached. $4.99. I held the tag up between two fingers so the light caught it. I heard myself speak in a voice I barely recognized. Calm. In a way, calm only happens after too many disappointments. Thanks, Dad. Best $5 you ever spent. The sentence floated in the air, light as a feather and heavy as a hammer at the same time. For a second, no one moved. Then my grandma pushed herself up from her chair so fast it scraped against the bowl. Hardwood. What? Are you kidding? I gave him $2 million for your gift. Her voice cracked and carried across the dining room, bouncing off the wreaths and garlands hung for a celebration that had already curdled. Silence spread across the table like a stain. My dad's face was drained of color. My mom's hand flew to her chest. My sister's smirk collapsed. My brother looked suddenly fascinated by the seam in the tablecloth. I did not react at first. It was like a slow wave moving through me. A cold one, rolling from my chest into my stomach. I had come home for the first time in 12 years because my grandma's health was failing, and this might be her last Christmas. I had told myself I could handle whatever tension waited for me on the other side of the door. But I had not expected this. A $5 pair of socks, and a secret worth $2 million behind it. My dad cleared his throat, but his voice broke. "We need to talk. Privately, please." His eyes begged for something. Forgiveness, maybe. Or silence. Or some kind of complicity I no longer had the strength to give. Before I take you any further, let me ask you something. What are you doing right now while listening to this story? For me, when this happened, I was sitting at that long wooden table in Asheville with my hands shaking around a pair of cheap socks, wondering how in the world my own family managed to make me feel both invisible and useful only when it served them. I looked at Grandma. Her eyes were sharp, even though her body had weakened over the past months. She kept staring at my dad like she was seeing through him for the first time. My mom kept whispering his name under her breath, trying to hush the situation, to pull the edges back together, to keep the room from splitting. But it had already split. The moment Grandma said $2 million, something in the atmosphere cracked, and nothing was going to make it whole again. My sister crossed her arms, shrinking into herself the way she always had when trouble did not directly involve her. My brother shifted in his seat like he wanted to run, and me, I just stood there, holding that pair of socks, feeling the weight of 12 years slam straight into the present. I thought coming home would feel nostalgic, or painful, or even hopeful. Instead, it felt like stepping into a house built on sand that had finally started sinking. I could hear Grandma breathing hard. I could hear my own pulse in my ears. I could hear the clock on the wall ticking through what should have been a warm holiday. Dad tried again. "Please, we need to talk." "Not here." His voice was thin, stretched tight. He kept glancing at Grandma like her words were dynamite and he was trying to figure out how to smother the fuse. But Grandma did not sit back down. She kept her stare locked on him. She had trusted him with her money, with her intentions, with the hope that he would help secure my future. And now the truth had cracked open, right there, next to the cranberry sauce. I never wanted a gift worth $2 million. I had not asked for anything except a place at the table where I belonged. But standing there with $5 socks in my hand, I realized something I had avoided admitting for most of my life. My family did not see me. They used me. They filled my empty seat with their assumptions and took my silence as permission. And now the bill for all of that was coming due. When I finally set the socks back into the box, something inside me settled. A decision, maybe. A line drawn. A quiet kind of resolve that comes when the last illusion has burned itself out. I looked straight at him, and he looked away first. At that moment, I understood that I had not just been pushed out of this family years ago, I had been erased. And now, something far larger than a ruined Christmas was about to surface. I had no idea then just how deep the betrayal ran, or how many lies were buried under the surface of that spotless dining room. I did not know yet that this was the beginning of something that would unravel my entire past and reshape everything I thought I knew about justice. But I could feel it. The air had shifted. The truth was waking up, and that was the moment I stopped being the daughter who accepted whatever scraps my family gave me. It was the moment I began to see the shape of the fight ahead. Sometimes, the smallest gifts reveal the biggest truths. And sometimes a pair of cheap socks is the first crack in a very expensive facade. I had barely finished that thought when my dad stepped toward me again, rubbing his hands together like he could smooth the air back into place. "We need to talk." "Not here." His voice was low and tense, the same voice he used whenever he wanted a problem to disappear before anyone else noticed. He glanced at the doorway like he expected me to follow him out of pure habit, like I was still the girl who tiptoed behind him trying not to make things worse. But I did not move. I stayed standing beside Grandma's chair, close enough to feel her steady presence, even though her breathing was uneven. "Sit down, sweetheart." Gran's hand touched my wrist with a firmness that surprised me. Her voice was thin, but certain. She kept her eyes on me, not on him, as she lowered herself back into her chair. There was something in her face that looked like sorrow mixed with resolve, like she had been holding a truth for too long and was finally ready to let it out. I sat beside her. My legs felt tight, like they did not trust the floor. My dad stayed standing, trapped between pride and panic, his jaw shifting like he was trying to chew through the mess. My mom reached for the gravy spoon, as if rearranging dishes could somehow reverse what had been said. She would not meet my eyes. My sister and brother were frozen in place, both shrinking into silence, as if the safest thing to do was pretend this was not happening. Grandma drew in a long breath. I gave him $2 million from my retirement accounts. The room felt too small for the sentence. I heard the words, but they did not settle anywhere at first. "It was all the money I had saved after your grandfather passed. I wanted it to go toward your future. Something in your name." Her hand trembled slightly as she lifted her napkin, then let it fall into her lap. "I trusted your dad to handle it." My stomach tightened. I had not known about any of it. Not a single conversation. Not a hint. Not a whisper. I had spent the past decade building a life entirely on my own, scraping together rent, juggling part-time accounting jobs, paying off old debts I accumulated when I left home without a cent. $2 million for my future, and no one thought to tell me. He straightened his posture, trying to regain control. "Mom, tell her. She is confused." "Grandma, this is not what you think." He forced a laugh that did not belong anywhere near this moment. People her age remember things wrong sometimes. Mom nodded quickly. Too quickly. "Yes, she has been under stress. She probably mixed up the numbers. It was just a misunderstanding. Let us all calm down." Grandma lifted her chin. "I am old, not confused." Her voice cut through my mom's words like a clean blade, "and I know exactly what I gave you." The entire table sank deeper into stillness. Her gaze moved back to me. "I thought it would help you. I thought it would give you some foundation after the way things ended." I shook my head. "None of this makes sense. I never heard about any investment. No one told me anything." My voice started thin, but steadied as I spoke. "There is nothing in my name. Nothing of mine ever came from this house, except the memories I left with." His jaw twitched. "That is not true. You always overreact. It was supposed to be a surprise, something for later. You never gave us the chance to explain." Explain what? That a $5 pair of socks was meant to distract me from $2 million missing from Grandma's accounts. That was not a surprise. That was an insult wrapped in tissue paper. My sister let out a soft breath, almost a giggle, then stopped when Dad shot her a warning look. My brother kept staring at his plate like he was reading a confession in the mashed potatoes. Mom leaned forward, eyes wide in false concern. Holy, you know your dad always had good intentions. Maybe you misunderstood how things were arranged. You tend to misinterpret things when emotions run high. Gaslighting. Quiet, practiced, polished. My mom had always been good at twisting reality into something more convenient for him, her. When I was a teenager, she used that tone every time I tried to stand up for myself. She used it when I wanted to go to college out of state. She used it when I begged her to help me pay for books, telling me I needed to learn independence instead of handouts. She used it the day I drove away at 18 with a single suitcase and no plan for what came next. I could feel the same old tug now, the urge to doubt my own clarity. But I was 31 years old, and I knew when I was being handled. I lifted my eyes to her. I did not misunderstand anything. Gran gave you money she intended for me, and you never told me about it. Not once. That is the truth. Dad shook his head and took a step closer, palms out. You left, remember? You walked out on this family. We figured you did not want anything we have to offer. There it was. The old wound pulled open as easily as if it were fresh. When I left at 18, it was not because I did not want them. It was because I did not have the strength to keep being the girl they blamed for everything. I left because staying meant shrinking until I had no voice left at all. I left because every door I tried to open was shut in my face by someone who claimed to be protecting me. Gran's breath rattled as she reached for my hand again. I gave him that money after you left because I knew he would handle it better than I could. He promised it would be safe for you. He promised it was going into something with your name on it. Something stable. Something that would grow as you grew. She shook her head slowly. But I see now that he never told you because he never intended to. He stammered. That is not fair. You do not know what you are saying. I was doing my best. Managing finances is complicated. Things take time. He switched glances between me and Grandma, like he could not figure out who to convince first. My brother finally looked up. His eyes darted to mine, then away again. He opened his mouth as if he wanted to say something, but nothing came out. He folded his napkin instead. A tiny, quiet surrender. My sister tilted her head and whispered under her breath, "Here we go again." She had always loved drama, as long as it did not involve her. Her SUV keys glinted on the table like a silver reminder of where family loyalty actually landed. I looked back at the socks still resting in their box. $5. The truth of everything else felt heavier each second. I remembered standing beside my packed bags at 18, hearing my dad say that if I walked out now, I was choosing failure. I remembered Mom telling me that life would teach me lessons they no longer had them. Patience to teach. I remembered realizing that in this house, love was conditional and acceptance was temporary. And now I was learning something even darker. I had not just been pushed out. I had been wiped clean, used as a placeholder for plans I knew nothing about. He ran a hand over his hair. You are making this into something it is not. I was managing the money, that is all. There is no reason for you to get worked up, as if the problem was my reaction, not the secret he had kept, not the money that was meant for me, not the way the entire family seemed more upset about the scene than the truth. I looked at Grandma. Her face was strained, her breath shallow, but her eyes were clear, sharper than anyone else's in that room. She saw everything now. Maybe she had seen it for years, and hoped she was wrong. I spoke quietly, but every syllable felt like it carved something out of the air. I did not know about the money. I did not know about the plan. I did not know you trusted him with something meant for my future. I had to say each part carefully, so there would be no room for twisting. And if this was supposed to be for me, then hiding it means it never was. He bristled. That is not how this works. I was in charge. I met his eyes without flinching. That is exactly the problem. Mom's lips tightened. "You are being dramatic. If you had stayed, you would have understood the arrangement. But you left. You always leave." She said it like a scarlet letter she wanted to pin back on me. But leaving had been the most honest decision I had ever made. And now, seeing the fractures in this family laid bare on a holiday table, I realized something new. I had not left home. I had escaped a system. A system where I was valuable only as an idea, not as a person. Grandma squeezed my hand with what little strength she had left. Her voice was quiet, but it carried more truth than anything else spoken that night. "He used your name. That is what hurts me the most." Those words settled inside me like a stone dropping into deep water. Used my name, not my guidance, not my permission, not my knowledge. My name, the one thing I had taken with me when I left, the one thing I thought they could not twist. I stared at him, at the man who had spent years telling me I was irresponsible, that I lacked discipline, that I would never handle real money or real success. Yet he had taken $2 million under the promise of building something for me, something he never planned to give. In that moment, something shifted inside me, sharper than disappointment and deeper than anger. A quiet knowing. A recognition of the role I had been assigned without my consent. I was not the daughter who disappointed them. I was the daughter whose name opened a door they needed, a name they had used in silence while pretending I did not exist. The noise of dinner faded. No one touched their plates. No one tried to recover the evening. It was too late for that. What hung between us was not a misunderstanding. It was a pattern, a history, a quiet ledger of who mattered and who did not. And I finally saw where I stood. Not just outside the circle, but as a shadow they stepped over when it suited them. A signature line they filled with whatever story they needed. It's sitting beside Grandma, her weak hand wrapped around mine. I understood something I had never been able to say out loud. I had not only been forgotten, it was useful, and nothing else. That realization landed inside me like the first rumble of something much larger, a truth waiting to break the surface. And I knew this was only the beginning. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Grandma's face, the tremor in her voice, the way my dad kept glancing at the door like he could outrun what had been spoken. By the time the first light crept through the guest room blinds, I was already sitting on the edge of the bed with my phone in my hand. Something inside me refused to wait. If there was more to the story, I needed to know it before anyone else had the chance to twist it. I typed my full name into the state business registry for North Carolina, almost as a formality. I did not expect anything to appear. My name had always been the one thing I believed my family could not manipulate, the one thing I carried with me when I left Asheville at 18 with nothing but a duffel bag. But when the search results loaded, my breath caught in my throat. There it was. Silverline Ridge Capital, registered in 2018. My name is listed as Chief Investment Officer. My age, my birth date, my signature at the bottom of the Articles of Incorporation. I stared at the screen, unable to make sense of it. I had never signed anything. I had never even heard of this company. I scrolled again. The document had my home address, or at least the address I had used for tax filings years ago. It listed me as the primary decision maker for all financial activity. My photo was included in the digital profile, an old picture taken at my college graduation in Raleigh. Except something looked wrong. The background had been blurred and tinted, as if someone had copied my face and pasted it onto a brochure template. The corners of my smile did not match the lighting. My hair looked sharper than everything around it. Whoever created this had not been subtle. They did not have to be. A cold wave spread through my chest. My head felt light, like the air had thinned around me. I clicked through the legal filings. More documents, more signatures. Every page carried my name in looping handwriting that tried to imitate mine but missed the rhythm. My real signature slopes downward slightly. This one held a stiff, upward tilt, like someone drawing from memory instead of muscle. It was uncanny and careless at the same time. Then I saw my social security number typed neatly in the identification section. Not once, not twice. On every major filing. I blinked hard, hoping I had misread the numbers, but they stayed the same. My identity had been used for years without my knowledge. My hands trembled around the phone. I set it down, but the panic stayed trapped inside me, pressing against my ribs. I walked to the window and pulled up the blinds. Outside, the morning looked peaceful. Frost dusted the yard. A neighbor walked a small dog past Grandma's mailbox. Somewhere down the street, a car engine hummed to life. The world looked ordinary, but nothing in my life felt ordinary anymore. Not after seeing my name tied to something I had never touched. I picked up my phone again and searched for Silverline Ridge Capital. The website came up first, a sleek design with mountain silhouettes in muted blues and grays. The kind of site financial firms use to look trustworthy. Right there on the homepage was a photo of me, cropped to show only my face and shoulders. Beside it were words I had never spoken. Experienced financial strategist. Guided by integrity and long-term vision, helping families grow their wealth safely. My mouth went dry. Long-term vision, integrity, safety. Words my dad used to repeat when he lectured me about responsibility, usually right before telling me I had disappointed him again. Now those same words were being used to sell his illusion, except he was selling it with my face. I clicked into the investor section. There was a quarterly report listing projected financial returns, 14% annual growth. Unrealistic on its own, impossible for a new firm with no verifiable track record. Yet the report was formatted like any other. Crisp lines, official fonts, a grid of false numbers arranged neatly to inspire confidence. I scrolled deeper into the filings. I expected to see his name somewhere, maybe under a managing partner, maybe hidden in the fine print. But his name never appeared. Neither did my mom's. Every decision, every authorization, every approval had been assigned to me. It was like someone had built an entire paper version of my life without including me in a single moment of it. I opened the incorporation document again and zoomed in on the signature field. The forged version of my name curled at the end in a flourish I never used. My hand had always made simpler shapes, honest shapes. This one looked like someone trying too hard to seem confident. I felt heat rise in my face. Something inside me broke open wider than any anger I had felt the night before. I whispered the words without meaning to. How could he do this? The room stayed silent, offering no answer. I sat on the floor with my back against the bed frame and pulled my knees close. I scrolled through more documents. Licensing information, tax identification numbers, copies of forms supposedly filed on my behalf. Each one a reminder that whoever had done this believed I would never see it. Or maybe they believed I would never matter enough to cause a problem. I was beginning to understand that in my family's eyes, my absence had made me the perfect candidate, a signature line they could fill however they wanted. I opened a legal verification report, the kind that third-party firms produce to validate executive roles. My qualifications were listed in glowing terms. Decade of experience, advanced expertise in asset management, deep understanding of investment risk. None of it is true. I had been working modest accounting jobs, trying to pay off debts and stay afloat. Meanwhile, someone had built a fictional version of me who excelled at everything, a version of me who existed only on paper and served one purpose. I checked the state financial licensing database. No record of me applying for any credentials connected to investment management, yet the filings for Silverline Ridge Capital claimed I held responsibilities that required certification. Someone had bypassed the system. Someone had lied with my name to the government. My breath shook as I exhaled. This was not a misunderstanding. This was not a disagreement or a failed surprise. This was a fraud. Sustained. Intentional. Documented. And if the federal government ever investigated the company, the first person they would come for was me. My name was everywhere. His name was nowhere. A memory flashed through me so sharply that I felt it in my chest. I was 19, sitting on the edge of a twin mattress in my first apartment in Raleigh. I called Dad to tell him I had started a new job as a bookkeeping assistant. I was proud. It felt like a step towards something stable. He cut me off before I could finish. Bookkeeping is not real finance. Call early. Now I stared at a website calling me a financial mastermind. I felt sick. I forced myself to look through one last set of documents. Investor contracts, agreements bearing my signature, certifying that funds were being allocated safely. Dozens of pages. Dozens of forged signatures. Dozens of people trusting a name they believed belonged to a qualified professional managing their money. But that professional did not exist. She was a ghost wearing my face. I thought of Grandma's voice the night before, trembling when she said she had given him $2 million for something in my name. I thought of how hurt she looked when she realized I had never been told. Now I understood the truth behind that hurt. She had not only been lied to, she had been used in the same way I had. Her trust had been currency. I stood up on unsteady legs and walked toward the bathroom mirror. My reflection looked pale, almost unfamiliar. It felt strange to look at my own face after spending an hour staring at a doctored version of it online. One face belonged to me. The other belonged to a story someone else had written. I whispered again, this time with more clarity. This is federal. My voice filled the small room. I said it again, as if repeating it would help me believe it. This is federal. I splashed cold water on my face and gripped the sink. Whoever built this company using my name knew what they were doing. They understood how incorporation worked, how tax filings worked, how digital licensing looked to the public. They had created a flawless illusion, and I had been erased from the process entirely, except for the identity they had stolen. A sudden chill ran through me. If my dad had used my name to build something on this scale, then the money Grandma gave him was not the only piece of the puzzle. There had to be more. Other investors, other accounts, other lies buried under the surface of a company I had never seen until that morning. I stepped back from the sink and pressed my hands against my chest. My heart was pounding. My thoughts kept looping the same sentence. This is federal. Not just family betrayal. Not just financial secrecy. A crime built on my signature. A crime that could fall on me if anyone came looking. I walked back to the bed and stared at my phone screen again. The website glowed softly in the dim light of the room. My own face smiled back at me, calm and confident. A stranger. I closed the phone slowly, feeling a tightness settle deep inside me. A new understanding, sharper than anger and heavier than fear. Whatever this company was, it was no accident. It was not a small lie. And it was not something I could ignore or hope would unravel on its own. I had stepped into something far darker than I expected when I came home for Christmas. And now the truth was no longer just about money or lost trust. It was about my name tied to a crime that could change everything. When I walked out of the room, the weight followed me, settling on my shoulders like a shadow that finally had a shape. I did not know yet how far the damage went. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I was standing at the edge of something much bigger than betrayal. I was standing at the beginning of a federal crime, wearing my signature. I walked down the hallway with my phone still warm in my hand, feeling the weight of everything I had just seen settle deeper in my chest. The house was quiet. Too quiet. My dad and my mom were in the kitchen speaking in low, sharp whispers that stopped every time the floor creaked under my step. I did not go near them. I did not trust myself to speak without breaking something open that would never close again. I stepped outside onto the back porch for air. The winter cold hit my face, sharp and clean, and for a moment I let it steady me. I was about to sit when my phone buzzed, a number I did not recognize, Asheville area code. I hesitated, then answered. A shaky voice filled my ear. "Honey, is this Lydia?" It was Mrs. Whitmore, my grandma's neighbor from down the street. I had not heard her voice in years, but I recognized the soft Carolina drawl immediately. She had always been kind to me when I was a kid, offering cookies when I walked past her yard on the way home from school. I said yes. It was me. Was everything all right? She let out a breath like she had been holding it for too long. I sure hope so. I have been trying to reach your dad for 2 months. 2 whole months. No calls back. No returns. Nothing. And then I remembered I still had your number written in that old address book of mine. My chest tightened. Returns. That word snapped into place with everything I had seen online that morning. I asked her what she meant. She explained slowly, carefully, like she was afraid of saying something wrong. I put a good portion of my savings into your investment fund. Your father said you were running it. He said it was your future and that you were the best person to trust. I closed my eyes. My stomach dropped. I tried to keep my voice steady. Mrs. Whitmore, what fund are you talking about? The Silverline Ridge thing? She sounded confused that I was even asking. That is your company, right? I could hear my pulse in my ears. My throat felt tight. I told her gently that I had never heard of the company until that morning. I told her I was not running anything. And then there was a long silence, a long, heavy silence that told me she was putting pieces together she did not want to see. Oh, dear Lord. Her voice cracked. Your dad said it was for you. He said every bit of it was in your name so you could build a real future. He said you just were not ready to talk about it, that you wanted privacy. I trusted him. He is your father. I swallowed hard. The cold air felt too thin. I asked her how much she had invested. She hesitated. I could hear her shifting papers, opening a drawer, maybe finding the statement she kept tucked away. It was nearly $80,000. My husband's pension money. It was supposed to last me the rest of my life. My knees almost buckled. $80,000. That was someone's security, someone's home, someone's last year. I forced myself to breathe. I asked her if she knew anyone else who had invested. She let out a shaky breath. Almost everyone at the church. She paused. Your grandma's friends, comps from the neighborhood, people who trusted your dad. They all said the same thing. If it was your name on it, it had to be safe. I sank down onto the porch step. A cold wind pushed against my back, but I barely felt it. My name had become a shield my dad used to draw people in, and they had believed him because he was charming, confident, and respected. Because people want to believe the best in those they have known for years. Mrs. Whitmore kept talking, more quietly now, like she was confessing something. He told us you were brilliant with numbers, that you had big dreams, that you were building something the rest of us could be proud of. I feel so foolish. I should have asked more questions. I closed my eyes. I wanted to tell her it was not her fault, that the blame belonged to the people who lied, not the ones who trusted. But the words stuck in my throat. I asked her how many investors she thought there were. She sighed. I am not sure. Maybe 40. Maybe more. Every time someone got a return, they told people talk, you know. Folks were excited. It felt like hope. Hope. That was the cruelest part. My dad had used hope as bait. I thanked her for calling and told her I would figure out what was going on. She apologized again, even though she had nothing to apologize for. When the cold from the porch board seeped into my skin, but it grounded me more than it chilled me. 40 investors. Maybe more. Mostly elderly. Mostly people who trusted my family. A flow of money that could easily reach several $million. I thought this was not a side project or a single lie. This was a full operation built on deception. I forced myself to stand and walk back inside. The house felt even smaller than before. The air is thick with secrets. My dad and my mom were still in the kitchen. I could hear them arguing, but stopped when they saw me. He stepped forward. Lydia, we need to talk. I raised a hand to stop him. Not now. I needed to see her. I needed something steady to hold on to. When I pushed the door open, she was sitting up with a blanket pulled around her shoulders. She looked tired but alert, her eyes watching me with concern. Everything all right, sweetheart? I sat on the edge of the bed and took her hand. It was cold and thin, but she squeezed back with surprising strength. I told her about the call, the investors, the money, the trust people had placed in something they believed was mine. She listened without interrupting, her jaw tightening with every detail. When I finished, she leaned back slowly against the pillows. I knew he was hiding something, but I did not know he used you like this. Her voice broke. I gave him my savings, my entire life's work. I believed him when he said it was for you. A tear slid down her cheek, and seeing it made something inside my chest ache. My grandma had lived through hard years, saved every dollar she could, built a quiet and modest retirement. She had never been the type to fall for schemes, but she trusted my dad. She trusted him because he was her son, and because the family is supposed to be safe. I wiped her cheek gently. You did not do anything wrong. None of this is your fault. She looked at me, her eyes shining. I gave him $2 million. That was everything. Her voice trembled. I thought I was giving you something, not losing it to lies. 2 million. Hearing the number again hit me differently now. Not just because of the amount, but because of what it represented. Grandma had become the foundation of the scheme without even knowing it. I thought of a website claiming long-term stability, of the fake returns meant to keep investors quiet, of the forged signature pretending to be mine. And I realized something chilling. Grandma had been investor number one, not because she wanted to make money, but because she wanted to give me a future. That good intention had become the cornerstone my dad used to build credibility and lure others in. Her trust had legitimized everything that followed. The weight of that truth pressed down on me as I held her hand. I could feel her disappointment, not just in the money, but in the betrayal. Betrayal cuts deepest when it comes from someone we have spent our whole lives loving. I sat with her until her breathing slowed and her eyes began to close. When she drifted to sleep, I pulled the blanket higher around her shoulders and stood. The room felt dim, heavy with unspoken history. As I walked back through the hallway, my steps felt different, slower, more aware. I was not just navigating a family argument or uncovering a misunderstanding. I was walking through the early shadows of something calculated and dangerous, something that stretched far beyond Christmas dinner. When I stepped into the living room, the air felt colder. The house I had grown up in suddenly felt unfamiliar, like a place built on shifting ground. I looked around at the framed photos, the polished furniture, the decorations my mom had placed so carefully for the holiday. Everything looked intact. But now I knew the truth resting beneath the surface. My family had not simply hidden money from me. They had built a world on my name, and Grandma had unknowingly been the first brick laid in its foundation. I walked back into the living room with the quiet weight of everything Miss Mitmore had told me still clinging to my skin. The house felt like it was listening, like every shadow held another secret, and I realized that if I wanted answers, I would have to find them myself. My dad was in the kitchen pretending to rinse dishes. My mom stood beside him, wiping the same countertop repeatedly, her movements stiff and anxious. Neither of them looked up as I walked past. They were locked in their own whispered panic, trying to get ahead of something they had not expected to collapse. I went down the hallway to the small office my mom used as her workspace. The door was half cracked. A yellow folder sat on the desk. I recognized her handwriting on the tab. Account summaries. I hesitated, listening to make sure no one was coming. Then I slipped inside and closed the door quietly behind me. There were 2 stacks of papers on the desk. One neat, thin, tidy. The other thick and slightly askew, edges worn from being handled too much. I knew how my mom worked. She had been a meticulous bookkeeper all her life, the type who double-checked everything. If she had 2 stacks, there was a reason. Something told me the truth was in the messier one. I opened the top folder. Inside were spreadsheets detailing monthly distributions to investors. They all showed steady returns. Regular payments spaced perfectly across time. It looked too consistent. The kind of consistency that never exists in real markets. I skimmed the reports until I noticed something strange. None of the returns were sourced from actual investments. There were no portfolios, no funds, no assets listed anywhere. Just payments made out to people who had invested the month before or the month before that. Money in, money out. A perfect circle with no growth behind it. The truth settled cold and heavy. Classic Ponzi. I had studied cases like this in accounting forums, in articles shared among colleagues. They always followed the same pattern. Promise high returns. Pay them using funds from new investors. Keep everyone feeling secure and excited. Borrow trust from someone credible, in this case, my name, and let the illusion grow until it becomes too big to hide. I pushed the tidy stack aside and opened the second one. This one felt different. Handwritten notes, scribbled calculations, margin comments, all written in my mom's unmistakable slanted pen strokes. She was keeping 2 sets of books, one for investors, one for themselves. My stomach twisted. I flipped page after page, tracing what looked like the true numbers behind Silverline Ridge Capital. Not the glowing performance reports the investors received, but the actual cash flow. Money was coming in from dozens of people. Some sent $10,000, some $20,000. Grandma's $2 million had been listed as foundation capital, a phrase my dad used to love tossing around when he wanted to sound impressive. But instead of being invested, the money had been sorted into different accounts, some of which were marked with only initials. His initials, my mom's, and another set that made my breath hitch. N.H. Noah. My brother. I stared at the initials for a long moment. I thought of him sitting at the dinner table last night, eyes glued to the tablecloth. He had looked guilty, uncomfortable, like someone carrying something too heavy for too long. Maybe he knew everything. Maybe he only knew pieces. Either way, he was part of this, whether he wanted to be or not. I kept flipping. There were notes about a digital platform used to show investors fake dashboards. The name Blake was scribbled in the margin more than once. I knew that name. A tech guy my dad sometimes hired for freelance projects. Younger, eager, willing to do anything for extra cash. Now I understood why he had been around so much when I still lived here. My dad had been planning this for years. I whispered the words without meaning to. He built a whole world in secret. A list of new investor sources was clipped to the back of the file. Next to each name were small notes written in Mom's careful script. Highly trusting. Church referral. Believes in long-term growth. Athlete's widow. Fixed income. These were not just clients. They were targets. People chose because they trusted easily, or because they did not understand complicated financial systems, or because they were vulnerable. It made my stomach turn. I read through a sheet labeled Monthly Overview. I saw the truth in the numbers. The firm was not creating value. It was cannibalizing itself. Money from 5 new investors went to paying returns for 3 older ones, and the leftover amount went into accounts marked for my dad and my mom. They were siphoning off profits that did not exist, and they had done it repeatedly. Year after year. I picked up another folder. Inside was a marketing brochure. My picture was in the top corner. A younger me, smiling. Confidence. The caption under it said, Chief Investment Officer, Certified Portfolio Specialist, Risk Assessment Expert. None of those things were true. Not a single one. I flipped the page. There was a list of outreach strategies. Underneath was the name Maribel, circled twice. I remembered her vaguely from years ago. A polished woman with perfect hair who used to stop by the house to discuss business with my dad. She had a magnetic smile, the kind that could convince a stranger to follow her anywhere. She was listed as Director of Client Relations. I understand now. She had been the one bringing investors in, charming them, reassuring them, and every time she handed over a new lead, she thought she was helping build something legitimate. Or maybe she knew exactly what she was doing. The notes beside her name suggested so. High performer, 15 investor referrals, $400,000 earned in bonuses. My dad had written that number. I recognized the messy curve in the 4, the way the 0 dropped slightly lower than the others. He had paid her well, extremely well. I leaned back in the chair and pressed my hands against my face. I felt nauseous. The air in the room seemed thinner. My vision blurred for a moment. I could not tell whether it was anger or grief or disbelief, but something inside me was shifting, cracking, breaking apart. I reached for the folder marked Statements. These were the quarterly summaries sent to investors, showing how their accounts were supposedly growing. I studied the lines of numbers. They were methodical, predictable. A computer could have generated them. The same percentage every quarter, the same pattern repeated, with only slight adjustments to avoid suspicion. It was so neat that it was clearly fabricated. I wondered how many people had looked at these reports with relief, feeling safe, feeling like their future was secure. My chest ached. I thought of all the elderly faces who probably relied on these returns, people who had worked their entire lives, who had retired believing they were finally safe. People like Mrs. Whitmore. People like Grandma. People who trusted because trust was supposed to be the foundation of relationships. And my family had taken that trust and twisted it. I flipped another page and found a printed email exchange between my dad and my mom. The subject line referenced performance updates. They had discussed reducing payouts for the next quarter. My dad's email said that too many investors wanted withdrawals. My mom suggested pushing recruitment harder to bring in fresh funds before sending out another round. The tone was detached, like they were talking about maintaining inventory, not playing with real lives. I felt a cold shiver crawl up my spine. My mom, the one who prided herself on being ethical, organized, responsible, had become something else entirely. She had built the numbers. She had balanced the lies. She had made sure everything appeared legitimate on the surface. David had been the voice. Mom had been the engine. I set the papers down and backed away from the desk. The room suddenly felt smaller, the air thick with betrayal. I turned to leave and paused because something made me glance toward the lower drawer of the filing cabinet. It was slightly open. I knelt down and pulled it out fully. Inside were passports. 3 of them. Not ours. Not legal ones. Fake passports with blank pages. Next to them was a flash drive. I picked it up and stared at it. The weight of it felt heavier than it should have. There were also tickets printed for a flight out of Charlotte for 2 weeks from now. One way, no return. My breath caught. They were planning to run. I sat back on the floor, my breath shaking. My mind kept spinning through every memory I had of my dad telling me that integrity mattered. Of my mom lecturing me about being responsible, about doing things the right way. Now I saw those memories differently. Their words had never been about values. They had been about control, about shaping me into someone who would not question them. I stood slowly and shut the drawer. I gathered a few papers into my hands without thinking, like I needed proof of what I had seen, even though I already knew the truth. This was not just a pyramid built on lies. It was a machine, a system, an entire structure created by 2 people who were supposed to protect me. And I realized, standing in that cramped office with stolen documents pressed against my chest, that my mom was not just assisting. She was orchestrating. My dad was the face, the charm, the salesman. But Mom was the architect. The real betrayal was not the money. It was the foundation of deception they had laid so carefully, brick by brick, using pieces of my identity as if it were nothing more than paper. When I stepped out of the office, I felt the shift inside me settle. A line had been crossed, and there was no going back. I had no idea what I was going to do next. I only knew that the truth sitting in that room could drown an entire family. I started down the hallway, planning to slip the documents into my bag before anyone noticed, when a firm knock shook the front door. 3 sharp raps. Controlled. Official. I froze. My mom looked up from the kitchen with wide eyes. My dad stiffened, his hands still gripping the edge of the counter. Nobody moved. The knock came again. A deeper voice followed. Federal Securities investigators. We need to speak with Lydia Hawthorne. Every muscle in my body is locked. It was as if the walls of the house leaned in around me. I stepped toward the door slowly. Before I even touched the knob, my dad's voice cut through the stillness. Do not say anything. Let me handle it. His tone was urgent, almost frantic, but he kept his voice low, as if volume alone might make us guilty. My mom's face went pale. She began wiping the counter again, even though there was nothing there. She did not look at me. Her hands trembled slightly. I opened the door. 2 agents stood outside. Both wore dark coats, badges visible, their expressions unreadable. One introduced himself as Agent Brooks. He asked my name. I said it. My voice sounded smaller than usual, but it did not waver. He nodded once and stepped inside. We need to speak with you regarding Silverline Ridge Capital. My heart dropped hard. I said that I had nothing to do with the company. I said it honestly, but my honesty sounded thin next to the documents with my name on them. Without waiting for an invitation, the agents walked into the living room, eyes scanning everything. My dad stood near the fireplace as if he could blend into it. My mom pressed a hand to her throat. Agent Brooks turned to me. "We have received reports of fraudulent activity under your signature. For your safety and ours, we need you to come with us for questioning. You are not under arrest at this time, but you are being detained for further investigation." The word detained hit me like a punch. I tried to speak, but the room felt too heavy to breathe in. My dad did not say a single word in my defense. Not one. He stood there silently, as if the agents had come for a stranger. My mom did not say they had the wrong person. She did not say I was innocent. She did not say anything. Instead, she folded her arms and stared at the floor. I felt something collapse inside me. Agent Brooks gestured toward the door. "We can discuss everything at our office in Raleigh. Please bring your ID." I turned to get my bag from the bedroom, but as I took my first step away from the living room, I heard a sound behind me. A soft groan. A chair scraping. Then a heavy thump. Grandma. I spun around and saw her sway forward, both hands clutching her chest as she collapsed toward the carpet. My sister screamed. My brother ran toward her. I was frozen for a second, my mind slow to catch up to what my eyes were seeing. Then I rushed to her side. I knelt beside her and took her hand. It was ice cold, trembling. Her chest rose and fell in uneven gasps. "Gran, look at me. Stay with me." Her eyes fluttered open. She struggled to speak. I heard just one word. "No." My voice broke. "Help is coming. Just breathe. Grandma, please stay awake." My dad hovered near the doorway, wide-eyed, useless. My mom pressed her hands to her mouth as if the scene were happening on a screen, instead of at her feet. Agent Brooks called emergency services. His voice stayed calm even though mine was cracking. When he hung up, he knelt beside me. "We need to move her gently onto her back." I did as he said, though every part of me felt numb and shaking. Gran's breath rattled like each inhale might be the last. I held her hand to give her warmth, but it felt like I was trying to hold on to something slipping away too quickly. An ambulance arrived. Paramedics rushed in. They lifted her onto a stretcher as I followed them to the door. My legs felt like soaked cotton. Before they pulled her outside, she turned her head toward me. Her lips barely moved. I trusted him. The words tore through me. A clean, merciless cut. The paramedics loaded her into the ambulance. They told me I could not ride with them. They needed room. They needed speed. I watched the doors close. I watched the ambulance disappear down the street, its sirens slicing through the quiet Asheville morning. Agent Brooks touched my arm gently. "Ms. Hawthorne, we still need to take you in." I nodded, even though my throat was tight enough to choke on. I walked back inside to grab my bag. As I passed the living room, my dad stood against the wall, like a shadow, pretending to be furniture. He finally spoke. "This is not the time to make things worse. Do not say anything stupid." I stared at him, trying to find the man who used to lift me onto his shoulders when I was a little girl. The man who told me he loved me every morning on the way to school. That man was long gone. What stood in front of me now was someone who would rather watch me fall than admit the truth. I asked him one question. "Why did you use my name?" He looked away. His jaw tightened. "Tell them you signed the documents yourself." He said it softly, almost like a plea. "It will be easier that way." I felt the floor tilt beneath me. He was not protecting me. He was setting the final trap. My mom finally spoke. Her voice was quiet, controlled, and cold. "You need to remember that you left this family. You created distance. We had to make decisions without you." I stared at her. She was talking about stolen identities, stolen money, forged signatures. She had reduced all of it to independence, to the idea that my leaving at 18 had justified everything they had done since. My sister sat on the couch crying into her hands, not out of guilt, but out of fear that the family name might be tarnished. My brother paced back and forth, avoiding my eyes. I picked up my bag. I was shaking, but I stood straight. I told my mom that she knew exactly what she was doing when she kept 2 sets of books. I told my dad that Grandma might die because of what he had done. Neither of them responded. Agent Brooks escorted me out of the house. I climbed into the back of the government car. The door shut beside me with a final click that felt like something ending, or maybe something beginning. I could not tell. The ride to Raleigh felt endless.
The silence inside the car was suffocating.
Every breath hurts. Every mile took me farther from the life I thought I had. The family I thought was broken, but not beyond repair. Now I know better. Whatever had existed before had been an illusion. A house made of paper, standing in the rain. At the SEC office, they searched my bag, took my ID, and led me into a small interview room. White walls, metal table, 2 chairs. It felt like a place designed to strip someone of any illusion of safety. Agent Brooks sat across from me. He had a folder with my name printed neatly on the front. He opened it slowly. The silence stretched. Then he began to ask questions. When were you hired at Silverline Ridge Capital? Never. What is your position at the company? I do not have one. Did you sign the incorporation documents? No. Did you authorize financial activity under your name? No. Were you aware your Social Security number was being used for investment filings? No. The questions kept coming. I answered each one, my voice steady but shaking underneath. The agents took notes. They watched every expression on my face. It was clear they wanted to believe me, but belief meant nothing against a mountain of paperwork with my signature on it, with my photo, with my information, with my identity. Hours passed. They brought me a bottle of water. I could barely hold it. My hands would not stop trembling. They asked me to recount the events of the past 24 hours. They asked about Mrs. Whitmore, about Grandma, about the files I found. I told them everything. Still, doubt hung in the air. At one point, Agent Brooks leaned back in his chair and looked at me closely. Whether you intended it or not, your signature is on nearly every major document. That places liability on you. Liability. That word almost broke me. My mind kept drifting back to Grandma, lying on the floor, struggling to breathe, taken away in an ambulance with blue lights flashing across the street. I did not know if she was stable. I did not know if she was even conscious. I asked to call the hospital. They said I could do that later. First, they needed a full statement. By the time they finished, night had fallen. My throat felt raw. My face felt tight from hours of holding back tears. They placed me in a holding room. Not a cell, not officially, but the door locked behind me. I spent the next 3 days in that building, 72 hours. The longest 72 hours of my life. No charges, no explanations, just questions, waiting, and the slow unraveling of whatever strength I had left. Every few hours, an agent came to clarify a detail. Every time I repeated the same truth. I did not sign anything. I did not know. I did not take money. I did not create this company. But the truth felt small next to the giant lie my family had built. On the 3rd night, I lay awake on the thin cot they provided, staring at the dim ceiling. My chest felt tight, heavy with something I could not name. I thought of Grandma's last words before she lost consciousness. I trusted him. In that moment, the deepest truth washed over me. Cold and final. My family had not only betrayed me, they had offered me up. They had placed me on the front line of their crime, ready to let me take the fall, ready to watch my life crumble to protect their own. And that was the moment I reached the lowest point I had ever known. The moment I understood I had been sold out completely by the people who were supposed to protect me. The moment I realized I had nothing left to lose. I lay on the thin cot staring at the ceiling when the door clicked open for what felt like the 100th time. I expected another round of questions, another agent with another form, another slow peel of my dignity. Instead, a different man stepped into the room, younger than the others. Nervous, his eyes darted to the corners of the room before settling on me. "Ms. Hawthorne," he said, keeping his voice steady, even though his hands trembled. "My name is Agent Linden with the FBI. We need to speak with you." For a moment, my heart stopped. FBI. Not the SEC. A whole new level. A whole new terror. He sat across from me, resting a folder on the metal table. I braced myself for another accusation, another layer of blame. Instead, He did something no one had done in 72 hours. He looked at me with something like empathy.
"I want you to know you are not under arrest," he said.
"And you are not being charged. You are being detained while we sort through conflicting information." Conflicting. That word made my stomach twist. Conflicting meant someone had contradicted the story my dad and my mom had been spinning. Conflicting meant something had begun to unravel. Agent Linden opened the folder. A photo slid out. A face I recognized immediately. Blake Simmons, the tech guy, the one who built the fake trading dashboards, the one who coded my name into systems I had never touched, the one my dad used to praise for being brilliant with algorithms, the one whose name I had seen scribbled in my mom's notes. Agent Linden tapped the photo. He came in voluntarily. I blinked, not trusting what I heard. Voluntarily. He showed up at our local field office last night, the agent continued. Said he could not sleep. Said he had done everything your dad asked him to. Said he did not realize how deep it went until recently. I stared at the photo. Blake had always struck me as someone desperate to impress. Someone who wanted validation more than money. Someone who had probably believed my dad when he told him this business was legitimate. But even desperation had limits, and apparently Blake had reached his. Agent Linden leaned forward. He said one other thing. He said you had nothing to do with it. Silence washed over me. Heavy. Thick. Disorienting. He said you were unaware your identity was being used. He said you had never met most of the investors. He said your name was put on everything because it made the operation look credible. I swallowed hard. The room tilted slightly. Someone had finally told the truth. Agent Linden opened the folder again and pulled out a recording device. He played a short clip. Blake's voice filled the room, shaky and thin. She did not sign anything. She did not even know the company existed. He said her dad told him she was out of the picture, so he used her name to make it look more trustworthy. My breath hitched at the words "out of the picture." That was how my dad had described me. Not an estranged daughter. Not family, not a person. A logistical detail to be exploited. Agent Linden turned off the recording. Blake has agreed to cooperate fully. He is prepared to hand over every file, every code, every message. He has also agreed to wear a wire. A wire. The word hit me like a spark catching dry leaves, burning fast, burning deep. Why did he change his mind? I asked quietly. Agent Linden hesitated. He visited your grandmother in the hospital. She was unconscious, but he saw what had happened. I think something broke inside him. I lowered my gaze. A sharp ache filled my chest. Grandma. The image of her collapsing replayed in my mind. Her voice. I trusted him. Agent Linden sat back. Once we confirm more details, you will be free to go. For the first time since I had been brought there, something inside me was unclenched. Not hope, not yet, but the faint outline of relief. He stood and walked to the door, then paused. One more thing. There were instructions in the company's internal chat logs. Orders telling Blake to use your social security number. Orders to attach your signature to filings. Orders to route investor calls away from you. My voice cracked. Orders from who? Your dad. Agent Linden's reply was soft, almost apologetic. And your mom handled the paperwork to make it look genuine. The words felt like they scraped the inside of my ribs. I had known, but hearing it aloud turned the suspicion into something solid, something cold enough to hurt. When he left the room, the door did not lock behind him. I stared at the open space, unsure if I was allowed to move. My legs felt heavy. I sat there for several minutes, trying to make sense of the shift. A small crack had formed in the wall my family had built around their lies. A thin fracture. But a fracture could widen. A fracture could topple the entire structure if pressed just right. An hour later, Agent Brooks returned. His expression was different now, less guarded. He held a handful of papers and a set of keys. Ms. Hawthorne, you are being released. My throat tightened. Released. We still have questions, and this investigation is far from over, he continued. But we no longer have grounds to hold you. The evidence provided by Mr. Simmons directly contradicts the narrative presented by your family, my family. The word tasted bitter. Do you have someone who can pick you up? I shook my head. The only family I had left was lying in hospital beds or digging themselves deeper into crimes. The remaining ones had given me up without hesitation. We can arrange transportation to Asheville, he offered. I nodded again, unable to speak. On the drive back, the world outside the window felt unreal. Cars passed. People walked into stores with bags of groceries. Life went on, normal and unbothered, as if the last 3 days had not happened, as if my identity had not been stolen, as if my grandmother had not collapsed, as if my parents had not stood silent while federal agents took me away. The closer we got to Asheville, the heavier the air felt. I kept waiting for the nausea to hit, for the panic to surge. But something steadier rose instead. A strange, simmering resolve. The driver pulled into the hospital parking lot because I had asked him to take me straight there. I stepped out of the car with the weight of 72 hours pressing down on my spine and walked inside. The nurse at the desk gave me a sympathetic look when I asked about my grandmother. She is stable, she said softly, still unconscious. I thanked her and walked down the quiet hallway until I reached Grandma's room. The sound of the heart monitor filled the space with a soft, rhythmic beep. I stood at the foot of the bed, staring at her face. Her hair was brushed back neatly. Her hands lay folded on the blanket, small and delicate. I sat down beside her and took her hand gently. Her skin was warm this time. Not cold like the last time I held it. A lump rose in my throat. "Grandma," I whispered, "I am out. I am safe." Someone finally told the truth. She did not move. Her chest rose and fell slowly. I squeezed her hand once. She had been the first investor. She had been the foundation of the entire scam. And she had been lied to just as deeply as I had. For a long time, I sat there with her. The anger that had once felt like fire now felt like something colder, something sharper, something that could be cut if handled carefully. Eventually, I stood and walked to the window. Outside, the mountains were dark silhouettes against the fading sky. A place I had once believed was home. A place I now knew had been a stage for a long, quiet betrayal. A soft knock came from the doorway. I turned and saw Agent Linden again. "We have additional updates," he said. "Mr. Simmons identified several offshore accounts linked to your parents. Also, one of your father's associates has admitted to forging your signature on federal forms." The crack was widening. I stood there, holding the edge of the curtain, and realized something undeniable. For the first time since this nightmare began, the truth was no longer trapped inside files or hidden behind lies. It was leaking out. It was being spoken aloud. It was becoming undeniable. This was the first crack in their empire, and I intended to make sure it did not stop here. Agent Linden nodded to me gently before stepping away, leaving me alone in the quiet room with the soft beeping and the cold promise of justice beginning to take shape. I turned back to Grandma and whispered the words that were rising inside me, strong and certain. "The truth is coming for them." Those were the last words I whispered before I stepped out of Grandma's hospital room. But the truth did not arrive as thunder or sirens. It came quietly, early the next morning, in the soft hum of machines and the low murmur of nurses changing shifts. I had fallen asleep in the chair beside her bed, still wearing the clothes from my 72 hours in custody. When I woke up, the room was dim, the blinds half open, letting in a thin slice of gray mountain light. Grandma was still breathing, slow and shallow. Each inhale sounded like it cost her something she could not spare. A nurse walked in, saw I was awake, and rested a gentle hand on my shoulder. "The federal team will be here soon," she said softly. "They need to record her statement while she is strong enough." Her words felt like a stone dropping into water. Gentle, but inevitable. I nodded and stood, stretching stiff muscles that had been locked in fear for days. My grandmother, the one person in my family who had never used me, never belittled me, never tried to make me smaller, now had to spend the last of her strength confirming that I had been telling the same truth all along. I took her hand again, feeling the thinness of her skin, the delicate bones beneath it. "Grandma, it is okay. You do not have to fight for me. I will be fine." Her eyelids fluttered. She opened them just enough to focus on me. Her voice came out as a whisper. "This is not for you. This is for the money they stole. This is for what he did to you." Before I could respond, there was a knock at the door. Agent Linden entered with 2 other officials and a hospital technician carrying a small recording setup. They moved quietly, setting up equipment without disturbing the machines around her. The room filled with the soft beeping of heart monitors and the rustle of paperwork. Agent Linden approached Grandma's bedside. "Ms. Hawthorne, we are here to take your sworn statement. When you feel ready, we can begin." Grandma nodded slowly, though each movement seemed to exhaust her. The technician adjusted the camera angle, making sure her face was visible and the audio clear. I stepped to the corner of the room, wanting her to see me but not distract her. The recording light blinked on. Grandma drew a shallow breath. "My name is Margaret Hawthorne. I'm 79 years old. I am giving this statement voluntarily." Her voice was fragile but steady, like a thread that refused to break. "Please." She closed her eyes for a moment, gathering strength. Then she spoke. 12 months ago, I gave my son $2 million from my retirement account. I believed it was for a fund he said belonged to my granddaughter Lydia. He said it was for her future. He said she was running an investment company, and he was helping her get it started." The words cut deeper than anything I had felt in the SEC office. My dad had not just used my name. He had used her love. He had used every fear she had about leaving me, with something meaningful before she died. "Did you ever discuss this investment directly with your granddaughter?" Agent Linden asked. "No," she whispered. I tried many times, but he always said she was busy, or traveling, or could not talk at the moment. I trusted him to tell her." Agent Linden exchanged a look with the other officials. The room felt still, as if even the machines paused to listen. Grandma continued. "I realized something was wrong at Christmas. When she opened those socks, her voice trembled, her breath hitching. That was not a gift from $2 million. That was not a gift from a mother." I blinked hard, swallowing the sting in my throat. "Did you ever sign documents for this investment?" "I signed one paper. My son brought it to me. He said it was for transferring the funds into the account for Lydia's company. Are you aware that your granddaughter's signature appears on several documents connected to the fund?" Her eyes opened, sharp and clear despite her weakness. "Yes. And it is not her signature. I have seen her sign things since she was a child. The loops are different. The slant is wrong. The tail on the Y is too short. That is not her writing." Her clarity felt like a hand gripping mine from beyond the fog of everything that had happened. "Do you believe Lydia had any knowledge of your investment?" "No, she never knew, because if she had known, she would have come to me, and she did not." Her voice cracked on the last word. Agent Linden waited, giving her time. "One final question," he said softly. "Do you believe your son and daughter-in-law misled you?" A tear slid down her cheek. "Yes, they did." Her breath came faster, uneven. I stepped forward, wanting to help her sit up or ease her discomfort, but the technician held up a hand. They needed a clean recording. They needed her statement complete. Grandma swallowed hard and looked directly at the camera. "My granddaughter is innocent. If you want the truth, follow the money." It never touched her hands. Silence filled the room. The recording light went off. The technician began lowering the equipment. Agent Linden stepped closer to her bed. "Thank you, Ms. Hawthorne. Your testimony is invaluable." Gran tried to respond, but a cough shook her entire chest. I rushed to her side, holding her hand, steadying the oxygen tube. Her breathing turned shallow again, as if she had given the rest of her strength to those words. The agents packed their equipment and left quietly, letting the door click shut behind them. When they were gone, the room felt hollow, too large for the fragile body lying in the center of it. I pulled my chair closer and sat down, brushing a loose strand of hair from her forehead. "Gran, you did not have to do that." Her eyelids fluttered open again. "I wanted to. I wanted the truth to be recorded before I go." A cold ache tightened in my chest. "Do not talk like that. You are not going anywhere." She smiled faintly, the smallest curve of her lips. "Oh, honey, I know where I am going. I have felt it for months. I just needed to make sure you were not taken down with them." Tears blurred my vision. I squeezed her hand. "You did not need to save me." She exhaled slowly. "I did not save you. I protected what was already good in you." Hours passed. Nurses checked her vitals. Machines hummed. I stayed pressed close to her side, resting my head near her arm. She drifted in and out of consciousness, murmuring fragments of memories, bits of stories from when I was small. Sometime after midnight, she woke long enough to whisper one last thing. Her voice was so soft I leaned in to hear it. "I was proud of you long before any of this." I choked on a breath. She closed her eyes. It was the last thing she ever said. She passed 3 days later, quietly, without pain. The nurses told me she slipped away in her sleep. I sat beside her for hours afterward, holding her hand until it cooled, grieving the woman who had carried truth like a lantern through the darkest parts of my life. When the hospital finally took her body, I walked outside into the cold mountain air. The world looked the same, but nothing felt the same. Her testimony arrived at the federal office the next morning. Her signature, her voice, her final truth, stamped, logged, filed as evidence. A final act of love, wrapped inside the harsh reality of loss. And as I stood in the hospital parking lot, staring at the gray Carolina sky, the weight of what she had done settled over me like a vow. Her truth was now part of the record, and I would carry it the rest of the way. I carried Grandma's truth with me through the quiet days that followed, through the funeral arrangements, through the numb hours of signing paperwork I did not remember signing, through the steady march toward the trial that would decide everything. Her voice stayed with me. Her last testimony had set the stage, and now the rest of the truth had to follow. When the court date finally arrived, early on a cold March morning, the sky hung low over Asheville, like it was holding its breath. I walked up the courthouse steps feeling strangely weightless, as if grief had hollowed me out and left space for something sharper. Resolve, purpose, maybe even closure, though I was not ready to claim that yet. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with low voices. Rows of wooden benches were filled with people who had lost savings, homes, futures, and in some cases, their health, because of what my dad and my mom had built. I saw Mrs. Whitmore sitting in the front row with her niece beside her. Her face looked older than when I had last seen her, more fragile, but she gave me a small nod that carried strength in it. Other investors nodded too, small acknowledgments that I was no enemy to them, no participant in the destruction that had uprooted their lives. I sat behind the prosecution table, not as a defendant for the first time in months, but as a witness. The shift felt unreal. When the bailiff called for everyone to rise, the courtroom doors opened, and my dad and my mom were escorted in by 2 marshals. Their wrists were cuffed. The sound was soft but unmistakable, metal tapping against metal as they walked. My mom kept her chin high, her lips tight. My dad looked older, grayer, like someone who had aged 10 years during the investigation. His eyes flickered toward me, then away. Shame or anger, I could not tell. The judge entered and we all sat. The prosecutor stood and began outlining the case. Identity theft, securities fraud, wire fraud, elder financial exploitation, conspiracy, tax evasion, operating an unregistered investment firm, and deliberate misrepresentation to federal investigators. Each charge landed like another piece of rubble added to the pile of what they had built. Witness after witness testified. Investors told their stories, retirees, widows, neighbors who had known my family for decades. Many cried. Many trembled as they spoke. They told the court how my dad had visited them in their home, promising safety and long-term growth. They described how my mom presented polished spreadsheets that made everything look stable. They recounted the months they tried to contact Dad when payouts stopped. Every story echoed the same theme. They trusted them because they were family friends. They trusted the Hawthorns because they had always been considered respectable. Then came Blake, He walked into the courtroom looking hollow, guilt etched into the lines around his eyes. He carried a folder filled with emails, internal notes, account logs, everything the FBI needed to cement the truth. When he was sworn in, he looked down at his hands as he began to speak. "I created the reporting software," he said. "I coded the dashboards. I inserted Ms. Hawthorne's name into every place Mr. Hawthorne told me to. She never saw any of it. She never logged in once. She never approved a single transaction." He looked at me then, a quick flicker of apology in his eyes, before continuing. "I thought it was a startup. I thought we were building something real. But then I realized new money was going directly to older investors, that nothing was actually being invested. When I asked questions, he told me not to worry. He said his daughter approved everything. He said she was the one with the credentials." My throat tightened. The prosecutor asked him to clarify. "Did you ever speak to Ms. Hawthorne directly?" "Never." He said it with a steady voice. "Not once." The courtroom shifted, murmurs rising. The judge called for order. Blake handed over emails where my dad had written instructions in blunt sentences. "Use Lydia's SSN. Attach Lydia's signature. Put Lydia as CIO. Do not bother her with details." Every line carved another wound. Next, the prosecutor brought up the offshore accounts. My mom's name was on several. Transfers were traced to a bank in the Cayman Islands, totaling more than $3.5 million. When the agent presented the documents, my mom's face finally cracked. She dropped her gaze. Her composure slipped. My stomach flipped. Seeing her break felt nothing like victory. It felt like watching a structure collapse that had once sheltered me, back when I was too young to see the rot forming in its beams. Then it was my turn. When the prosecutor called my name, my feet felt heavy walking to the witness stand. I raised my hand, swore the oath, then sat. The courtroom felt too bright under the lights. "Please state your knowledge of Silverline Ridge Capital." I swallowed. I never worked there. I never saw company documents. I never signed anything. I had no idea my name was being used. The prosecutor asked me to describe Christmas dinner. The socks. The tag. Gran's reaction. I kept my voice steady as I spoke. When I described Grandma collapsing, a few people in the audience wiped their eyes. "Your grandmother believed the fund belonged to you. She believed the $2 million she gave your father was in your hands." I nodded slowly. Yes, she believed that because he told her so. When I stepped down from the stand, the room felt heavier than before. My dad stared at the table. My mom stared straight ahead, expression stiff. The defense tried to argue intent. They tried to paint the operation as mismanaged rather than fraudulent. They attempted to shift blame to Blake, to market volatility, to confusion, to anything except the truth. But every attempt fell apart under the weight of evidence. Then came the moment the courtroom had been waiting for. The judge called my dad to testify. He hesitated before standing. For the first time in my life, he looked small. He took the stand, placed his hand on the Bible, and swore in. His lawyer asked the first question. "Did your daughter participate in the creation or operation of Silverline Ridge?" "Capital." My dad's jaw tightened. His voice cracked. "No." A whisper rippled through the courtroom. "Did she sign any documents?" "No." "Did she authorize the use of her identity?" "No." Then why did her information appear on company filings, account documents, and investor reports? He swallowed hard. "Because it made the company look legitimate." She was out of the picture. She had been gone for years. Using her name gave us credibility. Gave us credibility. That sentence carved itself into me with a sharpness I could not describe. My dad had not used me out of desperation. He used me because he believed my absence made me expendable, because he thought I would never find out. The prosecutor stepped in. "Did you deceive your mother? Did you take her money under false pretenses?" He closed his eyes. "Yes." "Did you tell her the fund belonged to Lydia?" "Yes." "Did you forge your daughter's signature?" "Yes." "Did your wife assist in falsifying financial documents?" My dad looked at my mom. Then, something breaking across his face. She held his stare, jaw set, eyes stern.
He looked down again.
Yes. A soft gasp came from the audience.
My mom's hands clenched on the table.
For a moment, I wondered if she regretted anything, or if she simply regretted being caught. The prosecutor asked about the offshore accounts next. My dad tried to distance himself. He said he did not know about them,
That they were my mom's idea.
My mom snapped, "No, you told me to move the money."
The courtroom erupted in whispers again.
The judge had to call for order.
Their partnership was shattering under the weight of exposure.
Every lie they had built together was now pulling them apart.
When the closing arguments finished, the judge took a long pause before delivering the verdict.
He looked out over the courtroom filled with victims who had lost so much already. For the Hawthorns, he said, the damage was not limited to finances. It was emotional, familial, communal. This was not a simple mismanagement of funds. It was a deliberate, sustained, calculated deception. It spanned years. It affected vulnerable individuals, and it weaponized trust. He turned to my dad.
For securities fraud, wire fraud, identity theft, elder exploitation, and conspiracy, I sentence you to 30 years in federal prison. 30 years.
My dad let out a sound like air leaving a punctured tire. My mom covered her mouth. A couple of investors nodded grimly. The judge turned to my mom.
For conspiracy, falsifying records, money laundering, and aiding in identity theft,
I sentence you to 25 years in federal prison and restitution of all misappropriated funds. My mom closed her eyes, her shoulders collapsing inward.
She had always held herself together,
Always kept control, but this time, control slipped through her fingers. Maddie Bell received 12 years.
Blake received 5 due to cooperation.
Other smaller accomplices received probation, fines, or shorter sentences. The final sentences were read. The gavel struck. The court adjourned. The sound echoed through the room like the final thud of a collapsing building. As marshals led my parents away, my dad turned once. His eyes searched mine. For forgiveness, for pity, for anything he could use. I gave him nothing. He had taken my name, my identity, my grandmother's life savings, and he had left me to rot in a detention room for 72 hours without lifting a finger. Now it was his turn to sit behind locked doors and wait. Karma was not loud. It was quiet, heavy, and irrevocable. And watching the courtroom empty around me, I realized something with a calmness that surprised me. Justice had finally found its footing. I walked out of the courthouse that day feeling like the air tasted different. Not lighter, not exactly sweeter, but steadier somehow. As if the world had finally stopped shaking under my feet. Months passed. Seasons shifted. Asheville's mountains turned green, then gold, then bare again. Life rearranged itself in slow, quiet ways. And somewhere in all of that, I began to build a life that had nothing to do with the one I had been born into. It started with the trust Grandma set up years before she died. The lawyers called me in 2 weeks after sentencing, their voices gentle, their eyes soft in ways that made me feel the weight of her absence more sharply. She had rewritten her plans once she realized what my dad and my mom had done. Her new trust was airtight, unreachable by anyone but me, protected by clauses that made even seasoned attorneys nod in admiration. Her $2 million was restored from seized funds and transferred into a structured trust under my name. I remember staring at the documents, hands shaking, not from greed or excitement, but from the enormity of what that amount represented. Her belief, her protection, her final act of love. I left the attorney's office with the folder pressed to my chest. Spring air brushed against my face as I stepped onto the sidewalk, and for a long moment I stood there, breathing, trying to understand how a person could feel both broken and rebuilt at the same time. Life slowly began to move again. I rented a small apartment overlooking the French Broad River, a place with creaky floors and windows that let in too much morning light. I liked it that way. Every sunrise felt like proof that I was still here, still choosing my own steps. I found myself drawn to financial recovery groups, not because I needed advice, but because I understood what it meant to have your future yanked out from under you.
The elderly investors who had lost their savings reminded me of Grandma's friends. I listened to their stories. I shared what I had learned. I helped connect them to legal aid and recovery programs. It started small, just a few people in a church basement. But word spread. By summer, I had become a sort of informal guide, someone who could translate complicated paperwork into plain English, someone who understood the emotional shock of realizing your trust had been weaponized against you. The trust grew too, not in money, but in meaning. It let me pursue training programs, workshops, licensing. 3 years after the trial, I became a certified financial wellness counselor. Me, the girl my family had once dismissed as someone who walked away from her responsibilities. The girl they painted as incompetent, careless, invisible. I used Grandma's money the way she had asked, building something with my name that was real and safe and clean. And every time I helped someone understand their finances or recover from fraud or simply feel less ashamed, I felt her close by. Not in some mystical way, just in the echo of her voice telling me she had been proud of me long before any of this. I kept one symbol from that old life, one reminder of the moment everything cracked open. The socks, those $4.99 socks, sat in a glass frame above my desk. White fabric, cheap cotton, the little price tag still stitched to the corner. People who visited my office sometimes asked about them. I always smiled a little and said they were a gift from someone who taught me them most important lesson of my life. They did not need to know more. The meaning was mine. My relationship with my siblings dissolved quietly. My sister tried reaching out once, months after the sentencing. She left a voicemail asking if we could talk, then mentioned something about how difficult it had been for her, too. I deleted it. I did not hate her. I was simply done making space where there was no reciprocity. My brother sent a short apology letter that felt sincere, but not anchored by action. I replied with a polite note. We keep a distant peace now, nothing more. My dad wrote from prison several times. The letters were long, rambling, filled with excuses and memories rewritten to make him look like a man who had simply made a mistake. I returned the first one unopened. The next, I threw away. By the fourth, I stopped checking the sender name entirely. I was finished carrying his version of reality. My mom never wrote. That silence felt more honest than anything she could have said. The years kept moving. Eventually, my work grew into a small nonprofit organization that helped victims of financial develop. Crimes rebuild their lives. Elderly people, single parents, small business owners, anyone who needed a hand when their world had been shaken by deception. We hosted seminars and workshops, taught people the red flags to watch for, and created networks where no one had to navigate recovery alone. We partnered with legal clinics. We coordinated with credit repair services and housing advocates. It became my purpose, my way of honoring what my grandmother had given me. Every December, no matter how busy the organization became, I made a tradition of visiting her gravesite. I brought fresh pine sprigs because she always loved the smell of winter. I sat on the cold stone bench beside her headstone and told her what had happened that year. How many people we helped, how many families we steadied, how many lives we kept from falling into the same hole she had nearly been dragged into. This past December marked the 5th year since everything fell apart. I walked through the cemetery bundled in a wool coat, the air sharp against my cheeks. Snow clung to the edges of the pathway in soft patches. When I reached Grandma's grave, I knelt down, brushed away the thin layer of frost, and placed a sprig of pine at the base of her stone. I sat with her for a long time, letting the quiet settle around me. It always felt peaceful there, not painful, not haunted, just peaceful. After a while, I spoke softly. Grandma, I finally understand something. Family is not supposed to make you smaller. It is not supposed to drain you or reshape you or use you as a shield. Family is supposed to be a place where your worth is not conditional. A breeze moved through the trees, stirring dry leaves across the ground. I took it as an answer. Maybe not from her, but from the universe that had kept me upright long enough to find my way back to myself. When I stood to leave, I looked down at her stone one last time. My grandmother's name is carved into granite, her birth year, her death year, and below it, the words she had chosen for herself while she was still alive. Generous in life, fierce in truth, perfect. Later that evening, I returned to my apartment, the warm glow of lamps spilling across the wooden floor. I hung my coat by the door and glanced at the framed socks above my desk. They still made me smile, a reminder of the moment I stopped being the invisible daughter and began being the woman who rebuilt her own life. I walked to the window, looking out over the river as the city lights reflected on the dark water. My breath fogged the glass. For the first time in years, I felt grounded, whole. Not untouched by pain, but strengthened by it. I thought about all the women who listened to stories like mine. Women who had survived betrayal, disappointment, financial harm, or families that never saw their worth. Women who kept going anyway. Women who fought to reclaim themselves, piece by piece. I wanted them to know they were not alone. So I share this last part with you, the one listening to my story. If you have ever been told you were too much or not enough for your own family, remember this: silence can be power, and truth can be the loudest revenge. Tell me in the comments what integrity means to you and where you are listening from.